Hello world, this is Brian, aka Invisible Doogie, and I am here back with another long tutorial, longer than I think any of my other tutorials on Project Spark. And the reason why this tutorial is so long is because we are going to talk about, in this tutorial, every one of the values tiles. I'm going to go through each one individually. We have global, number, Boolean, object, object set, text, vector, color, and there's a second page, boom camera setting, fixed camera setting, and brain. And the reason for this is I've gotten a lot of questions from a lot of different people about different uses for each of the different variables. Also, a lot of people it's a bit harder to grasp what a variable can do. So I thought this would just be useful, kind of create a compendium for all of you guys to reference every time you are jumping into using one of the new variables. You have a video now which covers each one of the variables for you. So what I'm going to do is in the comments below, I'm going to give you guys a minute counter of when I start talking about each one of the different variables. That way you don't have to listen to what I anticipate is going to be 30 to 40 minutes of me talking, depending on how fast I am at talking and coding. But before I get into that, and before you skip ahead, for those of you who don't know what variables are, let me kind of give you just the groundwork, the background, so you can kind of understand what a variable is and how generally you approach using it. And the really bad metaphor or analogy I like to use is think of a variable as a lunchbox for your day at school. So we have this number variable, and we have, say, the number variable pause attack. That is a lunchbox, so that's where it's going to hold all of your lunch items, but you haven't set any of your lunch items. So that's then when you do this pause attack is equal to, then you put all your items that go within inside that lunchbox to then kind of make up your lunch. So you're kind of setting what your lunch is in a way. It's a variable that 50% works, 50% doesn't, but it's the first one that came to mind. And the general idea is you're storing objects within here. You're storing things within your world, whether it's a Boolean that's storing that something is true or something is false. You're storing a number, you're storing an actual object, you're storing a brain, a color. That's what each one of the different tiles is. It's storing something that you can then pull in and reference whenever you want to within the game. So let's start with talking about number variables. That's the first of them, and it's also one of the easiest to wrap your head around. So what I'm going to do is I am going to initially set a number variable. So I've put it as a child under once. This happens once. I'm initially going to set a number variable jump that I created this is equal to 0. So right away, now the number variable jump is equal to 0. You've now set what this number variable is equal to. And just to illustrate it, then we are going to display this number. So we go to create, interface, display. I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to put this screen top right. I'm going to make it extra large. So let's quickly jump within my game, and you can now see that the number 0 is large and on top of my screen. So, that's interesting, but really doesn't do too much. You could always have just said display the number 0, screen top right. So the great thing about a variable is you can kind of change what it's equal to. And so we're going to do that. What I'm going to do is let's insert this, and we're going to do when I have started to jump. Then we're going to make the jump variable. I'm going to go to math, increment by 1. So first, the reason I'm using started to is because this makes this line of code only run once when I'm jumping. Otherwise, the entire time I'm jumping, it's incrementing up. So not just by 1, but it increments by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and goes up to like 10 or 30 or so on. So this makes it so that every time I jump, it increases by 1 point. So let's go in and test this. So you can see it's set at 0. I'm going to jump. Goes up to 1, jump again, goes up to 2, and so on and so forth. Keep on jumping, keeps on going up. So that is a very basic look at the number variable. A lot of people use that, for instance, when you kill an enemy, like this goblin I have right here, then you increase your death toll by 1. And so what that does is that killing that thing gives you a kill counter. And now we're going to talk about the global variables, because global is a very important thing to understand, and it's something that not too many people understand kind of its uses. But I wanted to go through one of the variables before I talk about global. So let's talk about that now. So I'm going to do insert here, go to values, and you see global right here. The description they give right here provides a central location for variable storage. That's a really bad description. If you click on more info, they actually give you a good description about basically when you set global, what that's doing is that is now saying that variable is the same exact throughout the entire world. Before you put global in front of jump was only caring about what happened within this brain. So I could have set right here, every time this guy jumps, then the jump counter is increased by 2. I could put that right in here, and if I didn't have global, it's going to display the exact same way that it did before, because again, I'm displaying the jump variable within this brain, and I'm not using global with the tiles. And so because of that, then it's not going to care about what's happening in any other objects. So when you do global, that's when it actually starts caring about what happens in other objects. So what I'm going to do is, to illustrate that, we're going to copy this, we're going to delete it from here, we're going to go into this rock, and this rock is a jumping rock, and he just constantly jumps. So we're going to paste in when he started to jump. Then let's add global. He's going to make global jump increment by 1. So now I have global jump happening across 2 different objects. And so in order for that to happen efficiently, you got to have global there, or else it doesn't know to communicate between those 2 objects. So let's look right here, see how it's going. And you can see every time he's jumping, he's incrementing the jump counter. And global is something that can be used with all variables, and with some variables you kind of almost have to use it. You're really limited if you don't use it. For instance, the object set variable really kind of needs global. I haven't found much uses for it not using global, but I'll talk more about that when I get to the object set variable. For now, let's move on. So let me just go ahead and delete this. And let's delete these. Now let's talk about the next variable, the Boolean variable. So a Boolean is a true or false statement. And what that means is, based on whatever happens in the world, you can make a Boolean true and you can make it false. And then depending on if it's true or if it's false, something in the world happens. So think of it as, for instance, when you have completed a quest, you have a Boolean that says quest completed. And when you've completed it, then you make the Boolean quest completed true. And so that means, okay, so now this Boolean is true. So now you can set, once the quest completed Boolean is true, then you can set this code for all of these different things happen. We're not going to do that because that would take a while. So I'm going to instead do something a lot more simple, and we will do when we're going to choose this goblin. When that goblin is dead, then we are going to have the dead Boolean is equal to true. So what we're going to do is when the dead Boolean. So a rookie mistake I used to make is I would set dead equal to true or dead equal to false right here for the when side. And you don't need to do that. When you're using a Boolean, all you need to do is when dead, and that basically says when this thing is true. So you don't have to write that out. So then if you're looking for when it's false, then you just simply do when not dead. So that would mean when it's not true. So when it's false, then something happens. But we want to do when this is true, something happens. So when dead, then we are going to do two things. First, we're going to play an effect. Let's just play Death Impact. And then we're going to make dead equal to false. And so this turns it off again. And so if I didn't do that, because once I made dead equal to true, then if I don't make it false again, it will just continually play this effect over and over again. And now one other thing I just quickly wanted to show you is you can also, with Booleans, if you go to the math tile here, you can choose toggle. And let's just do toggle for this. Just pretend I deleted these two because these two won't work. But what this basically does is you can instead toggle something on and off. So when the goblin's dead, it toggles dead. Since every Boolean starts out automatically false, the first time this goblin is dead, it toggles it to true. And then, once he's dead, once the FX is playing, then it's going to toggle it again, and because it's true, it toggles it back to false. So this is how you can also toggle something from true to false. Just be warned if you're doing a lot of toggles back and forth. Sometimes, based on certain events, it could, you could have unneeded things happened. So just make sure when you're using toggle that things are properly toggling on and off, and that there isn't kind of a third situation that might arise where it doesn't toggle off at a certain point. So when you need it to toggle on, it toggles off, and that makes it more confusing. But for this, I'm just going to instead do dead equals to false right here. And dead equals to true right there. So when this goblin is dead equals true. When dead equals true, we're going to play the FX Death Impact, and then we're going to make it equal to false. So let's quickly hop into the game. And you saw it briefly flash on the screen, that effects. So just simply like that, we have made it so that this Boolean does all of these different things, and then it turns off. Okay, moving on to the next one. Object variables. So let's actually go into this goblin. And let's go and let's bring in the default enemy brain. If you've ever seen the default brains, you probably noticed this thing right here, that they always seem to set my enemy. And for people who are newer to Project Spark, you probably wonder, well, what is my enemy? And this is an object variable. What this is doing is it's setting that the enemy nearest to this bad guy, or the player, if they're on a neutral team, who's the nearest to this bad guy, then my enemy is equal to it. It kind of does it reversely, but it basically says that thing, it, which is that thing right here that is defined, is now equal to my enemy. So this is now storing the object that its closest enemy is equal to my enemy. And then what we do here is it's now going to call in that, so when my enemy is closer than 20, then I move towards my enemy. When it's closer than 2, then I attack my enemy. And so because of that, it's defining kind of all of the different things that happen with my enemy. So we're going to put that to practice right here in the player brain. And what we're going to do is when 1 is pressed, then we are going to shoot at target. So let's actually define what the target is. So we're just going to make this a once, because I'm going to just hard code in that the target is the goblin. So target equals, then we'll use inward picker, and we're going to choose the goblin, and now target equals to the goblin. So now what we have is we've set the target is now equal to the goblin. When 1 is pressed, I'm going to shoot at the target. So unlike regular shoot, which shoots straight forward, this is when I'm shooting, it's always going to be shot at that target no matter where I am or where it is. So let's see what that looks like. So I'm walking around, and you can see that no matter kind of where I am, it's firing directly at that goblin. And then once it dies, I'm pressing 1 and nothing's happening, and that's because that object is no longer defined, so it no longer knows what to shoot at. So that's objects in a nutshell. Now moving on to the object set, which is kind of just an iteration on top of objects. So an object variable is where you can store one object, but an object set is where you can store a whole list of objects. So I have this goblin here, and I have this rock here, and we're going to add this to a list of objects. So first I'm going to delete this brain. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do once. Then we're going to go to this object set variable. Actually, I'm going to choose global, because like I was saying earlier, when you're setting a list of objects throughout the world, it just makes sense to use a global tile, because it's happening across multiple objects. So we're going to call this targets. And then what we can do is go over to the math tile, and we can do increment by me. So what this does is this is saying that this list of objects, we are now adding myself to this list of objects. So now we go over to the rock, and we do that here too. And now it's saying, okay, this rock is now also part of this list of objects. So currently we have two different things being added to this object set, which is called targets. And so what I can do is now I can call in that list. So we're going to do, once again, just like we did last time, when 1 is pressed, then I'm going to shoot at global. You always want to, when global is used somewhere, it needs to be used everywhere else. then the object set targets. So now what this is going to do, unlike last time where it shot at that one target, it's going to shoot at all of the different objects within this target list. So let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to fire, and as you can see, it goes in both directions. And then once that goblin dies, it automatically removes itself from the object set. So now when I'm shooting, it's only shooting at that rock. And now another quick thing you can do is with the object set is, let's see, let's also make this once. Then we're going to do global object set of targets. Then we can make this equal to or increment. Basically, when you make it equal to, then that list of targets is only going to be equal to that one thing. When you do increment by, then that just kind of adds it along to the list. So let's do increment by. And then what you can actually do, you can open up the gallery picker. And then, for instance, let's just say your enemies with apples, or your targets are apples. So what this has done is any apple used within your game is now added to this object set. Just like that. Because you chose apples from gallery picker, and every apple in the game is taken from that same gallery picker, that means it adds all of them. And that is object sets in a nutshell. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, text variables. So I found a few uses for text variables. I think you could probably use this for an RPG, have some fun results. But let's set this initial text variable. And a text variable, as you would probably assume, stores text. So let's do, you know what, let me call this something different, because it's weird calling a text variable text. So we're going to call it greeting. So the text variable greeting, we're going to make that equal to, let's go into values, text here, greetings adventurer. So I'm going to do, when I'm holding down on the number 1, then I'm going to display greetings, screen top center, and extra large font. So what this is doing is it's making it so that it's just displaying the greetings variable, which is greetings adventurer. What you can now do is, let's do when the number 2 is pressed, and we're going to make this only happen once. Then we're going to do greeting, and we're going to increment that by you've traveled long and far. So when I press the number 2, it then adds on the text you've traveled long and far to greetings adventurer. So let's see what that looks like. So I hold down the number 1, it says greetings adventurer. Let go of that, hold down, press the number 2, and hold down the number 1 again. And then it says, greetings adventurer, you've traveled long and far. So you can think about how, in an RPG, you could make that, or it doesn't have to be an RPG, but, any game with lots of text trees and dialogues, you can use this effectively by, based on certain things happening within the game, you can add text on there. You can also change just what the text means. So, like if, for instance, you can kind of have a text variable work the Boolean variable. So like if a text is complete, then it shows then greeting text would be equal to, yeah, you completed the quest. And if the quest is not complete, then the greeting text would be equal to, no, you haven't completed the quest. Come back when you do. So, that's how you can use a text variable. All right, next one up. Vector variables. So I'm going to be kind of brief with vector variables, and the main reason is I have a whole tutorial on vectors, because vectors are another thing that's pretty hard to grasp. You have two different types of vector variables. You have in-world vector variables and on-screen vector variables. On-screen vector variables work off of an XY graph, and in-world vector variables work on an X, Y, and Z graph. And if none of what I said makes any sense to you, go to my videos, and 2 videos ago, I have my full tutorial on vectors. It's also kind of long, but it gives you really the full rundown of how to use vectors. So just to quickly show you kind of an example of a vector variable here, though, we're going to set when once start location is going to be equal to my position, and then when I press the number 1, then my position is going to be equal to start location. So what this is doing is once, so only at the very beginning, it's storing start location as my current position. It's only doing that once, so that means that as I'm moving along, it's not copying that again. But when I press the number 1, it's going back to that same start position that was cataloged at the very beginning of the level. So let's jump in, see what this looks like. So I walk around, and then let's press the number 1, and I go back to the very beginning again. So this can be very useful for, when your player dies, you use the vector variable to bring him back to the beginning or bring him back to a checkpoint, whatever you want to do. If you have questions about checkpoints specifically, and if you don't already follow Mescad on YouTube, please follow him. He has the most amazing tutorial videos out there for Project Spark, and has some really good ones on checkpoints. And all of his tutorials are far better than mine too. But anyways, let's move on to the next of the variables. And I believe that's colors, right? Colors I'm going to really quickly cover, because I just haven't found a cool use for this yet. So let's set a new color variable. Let's call it, let's see, what color do we want to do? Let's do seafoam. So we're going to make seafoam equal to, go into values, go into colors. When you click on new color, it brings up this whole list right here. So we're going to go for seafoam green, which is about that. And now we have set seafoam is equal to this color we have just set. So what I can do is when the number 1 again is pressed, and I just do that because it's number 1 is one of the first options there, so it's easy to choose that. Then I'm going to go to my appearance, go to color properties, go to primary color, and I'm going to make that equal to seafoam. Let's copy this again. There we go. So let's jump into the game and press the number 1. And now suddenly my primary color of my clothes is a nice seafoam green. So, I guess if you change your clothes throughout the level, or, an object changes colors at certain points, that's where you can use color variables. I've never used them before, haven't really found much of a use, but maybe you will. All right, we're getting near the end, those of you who stuck with me from the beginning. I'm going to cover boom camera setting variables and fixed camera setting variables together, because they follow the same exact concept, and that is basically we're storing a position of a camera here. So let's do new boom camera. Let's call this inventory view. So when once inventory view, we're going to make that equal to, let's choose this, and let's go for this right here. So we just set that boom camera location, and that is now equal to inventory view. So what I'm going to do is when I'm holding down on the number 1, then we are going to do a boom camera view. And that boom camera view is the inventory view. And else, so when number 1 is not pressed, then we're going to do follow camera, the usual follow camera. And so let's hop in here. I was having some problems earlier with some glitches with this, so let's see if it's still glitching out on me. So walk around, so let's press number 1. Yeah, it's still glitching out on me. So for some reason, when I'm pressing this, it's going to a default set for the camera. So if I'm doing anything wrong, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I think it might just be a glitch right now with the camera systems. But I need to do a bit more testing with that. But so let's instead switch over to the fixed camera settings. So let's set this to bird's eye. So the fixed camera variables. So let's choose in-world fixed camera. So bird's eye, you probably assumed we were going to do a nice bird's eye view. If you notice, if you've played around the game Link's Adventure, where when you hit a button, you zoom out to this world map view, this is kind of how he did it. He just did a really high up camera right here. So we're going to accept that. So bird's eye is now equal to that. So when the number 1 is pressed, we're going to do fixed camera. We're going to bring in bird's eye. And so when number 1 is pressed, you're going to show the fixed camera bird's eye. When it's not pressed, then you're going to do follow camera. So let's see what that looks like. So usual follow camera, hold down number 1, and then it shows the view from the very top. And it follows along with my character as he's walking. But my character is way too small, so no way you can see him. And so, those can be useful for setting different camera views for different things. Once the boom camera is fixed, what I was going to show you guys is how you could have, for instance, when you switch into your inventory, you switch to a new perspective of your character, because a boom camera follows your character around. So it's always going to be in perspective to them. So like, for instance, you could have a boom camera when pressed, it looks like this. So you have your character on the side, and then you have a nice screen here that shows kind of his inventory. I haven't seen anyone do that yet for use the boom camera with inventory paired together like that, but I think that would be really cool if someone did that. So hint, hint, someone, whoever wants to be the first one to do that, you can. Okay, so I'm finally at the last one now. And let's cover off on this one pretty quick, because it's one that I still don't understand its value. And this is the brain. So I created this jumper brain right here. And just like all the other variables, a brain variable is something where you store items into the variable, and based on whatever you store, that is what that variable is equal to. So let's get into this rock right here. And let's do once the global brain variable jumper. We're going to make that equal to, jump into brains right here, multi-brains. So within multi-brains, you have 3 options: add brain, get brain, this brain. I've played around with all 3. in regards to brain variables, and they all seem to have the same exact result, where they basically set that whatever brain you're in, that's the brain it is. So even if you try and get a brain outside of this brain you're in, it doesn't seem to work for whatever reason. So really, the only thing I've been able to do so far with brain variables is set a brain variable equal to a certain brain. So, I don't know why that would be useful, because we have a full set of multi-brains, and in-world picker works very well, but I don't know. If someone is using brain variables for something in their game, post it in the comments below. I'm interested to see if there is a use to the global brain variables, and what that use might be. But so what I did here is I've set that the global brain variable jumper now equals this brain. So what I can do now, bring in my knight right here, switch into his brain. Let's delete his page. And then we are going to go into brains, push brain, and then we're going to choose global jumper. So what that's doing is that is giving this guy the brain of global jumper, which we have set to equal this guy right here. So I jump in, and both of them are jumping. Again, I don't know the benefit to brain variables. I've played around with a lot. I thought that you would be able to increment and add a bunch of brains together for the brain variable. That would be pretty cool, but you can't. I always kind of wondered why no one has talked about brain variables, and now I understand why. And it's because there isn't too much really practical use to them. But, I still cover them here in case I am wrong, and in case you were just curious about what the brain variables do. Okay, so I've talked at you guys enough. That will do it for this tutorial. I hope this was useful. I hope you learned a lot about all the variables. If you have any other questions about any of these variable tiles, or just other questions in general, post them in the comments below. You can also find me on project-spark.org. I'm Invisible Doogie, one of the mods there. I try to be on as much as possible, but really I'm nowhere near as helpful as most of the other community members there. Everyone there is super great. They're the ones who kind of help me figure out this kind of stuff myself. So go there and make sure to join in the great community that's established there. So that'll do it now for me for this episode. I'll try and post another tutorial. I'll try and make it not as long as this, and thanks for listening.